Hello, my dear listeners, and welcome to our little corner of stories that warm the heart. Today, I've brought a story that I promise will move you. It's about Livia and Raul, two childhood friends who grew up side by side. He became a millionaire businessman, she, a simple woman with a giant heart. Until one day, Raul came to her with a proposal that would change everything. Livia, he said, I need an heir to secure my empire. Will you help me? And do you know what she did? She accepted in a heartbeat, but not for the money. She had a much deeper reason, something she had kept hidden for years, something he had never imagined. Tell me in the comments, what are you doing while you listen? Are you at work? On your way to work? Sipping afternoon tea? Or making lunch? Let me know how you share these moments with us. If you're already curious to uncover Livia's secret, leave a warm like and get comfortable, because this story is full of breathtaking twists and turns. Let's begin. In the São Paulo neighborhood of Morumbi, two families lived in completely different realities, separated by only a few blocks, yet by a social chasm that seemed impassable. On Pinera Street, at number 247, lived the Silva family in a simple, single-story house with an iron gate that always creaked when someone came through. Livia was 7 years old when she met Raul, and even at that young age, her large, expressive brown eyes captured the attention of anyone who looked her way. Her curly hair tumbled over her shoulders, always tied back with colorful scrunchies her mother bought at Mr. Antonio's shop on the street corner. Her father, João Silva, worked as a mechanic, while her mother, Maria, sewed baby clothes from home, bringing in a little extra when orders were good. On the other side of the neighborhood, on the Alameda dos Jacarandas, stood the Machado Mansion, an imposing three-story structure with enormous gardens that took up an entire city block. Sebastião Machado, the family patriarch, had built an empire in civil construction. His grandson, Raul, was an 8-year-old boy with dark hair, always perfectly cut at the most expensive salon in the district, and blue eyes that contrasted with his fair skin. His posture already hinted at the refined education he was receiving at an elite private school, where the monthly tuition alone cost more than Livia's father earned. Destiny brought these two children together on a sunny Thursday afternoon in late March of 2010 at the playground in Santos Dumont Square. Livia was there with her grandmother, Donna Carmen, who always took her to play after she got out of the local public school. Raul was with his nanny, Dona Conceição, a woman who had worked for the Machado family for over 15 years. Can I play with you? Livia asked, seeing Raul alone on the slide, engrossed in the iPhone his father had given him for his 8th birthday. She wore a little floral dress, sewn with love by her mother, and a pair of slightly worn sneakers. But her smile was so genuine and bright that Raul immediately looked up from his device. Of course you can. I'm Raul. And you? He replied, tucking the phone into the pocket of his designer shorts. Livia, you're not from around here, are you? I've never seen you at school. I go to school in Higienópolis, Raul explained, trying not to sound superior. My grandmother lives near here, on Alameda dos Jacarandas. Livia didn't know where Higienópolis was, but she was fascinated by the proper way he spoke, as if he had memorized the words from a book. From that day on, whenever Raul visited his maternal grandmother, whose house was more modest than his parents' mansion, but still very comfortable, the two would meet at the playground. Livia learned about things she had never heard of, faraway places he had traveled to, like Paris and London, and foods with strange names he ate at expensive restaurants. In turn, Raoul discovered games he had never played: hopscotch, tag, hide and seek, and he learned that Livia laughed with a purity that made him want to laugh too, something that didn't happen often in his structured life. My mom says when I grow up, I'll work at my grandfather's company. I'm going to own everything, Raoul said one afternoon as they sat on the seesaw, rocking gently. What about you? What are you going to be when you grow up? He asked, genuinely curious about the dreams of the girl who had become his favorite friend. Livia thought for a moment, her feet dangling above the ground. I want to be a teacher, to help kids like us learn new things. My mom says it's a beautiful profession. You could work at my company when you grow up, Raoul suggested, not quite understanding why the idea made him so happy. Then we could work together forever. Livia's heart gave a little flutter, a strange and wonderful feeling she was too young to understand, but tucked away in her chest like a treasure. The months passed, and their friendship blossomed, pure and untouched by the complexities of the adult world. Livia eagerly awaited Thursday and Sunday afternoons, knowing Raoul would be at the park. Raoul, who had every expensive toy and video game, began to feel that he was only truly happy when he was with the girl with the curly hair, who made him forget everything and just be a child. Livia, I have to go away, Raoul told her one December afternoon. His eyes brimming with tears, he tried to hide, because the men of the Machado family were not supposed to cry. My father got me into a boarding school in Switzerland. He says it will prepare me to take over the company. His voice, attempting maturity, came out choked. Livia felt her world crumble. At 8 years old, she already knew she liked Raoul in a way that was different from her other friends. But you'll come back, right? She asked, her voice trembling. Of course, I'll come back. And when I do, will you be here waiting for me? Raoul asked, holding her small hand in his. Always, I'll wait for you always, she replied, making a silent promise in her heart that she would carry for the rest of her life, not yet knowing how much those words would come to mean. The farewell took place on a hot January morning in 2011. Livia wasn't there, of course, but in his suitcase, Raoul carried a colorful bead bracelet she had made for him and a photo of the two of them that his nanny had taken at the park. Livia, in her bedroom, tucked away the little blue toy car he had given her, along with the promise etched in her heart that one day he would return. And so began a separation that would last 15 long years, but could never extinguish the first love of two children destined to meet again. 15 years later, in March of 2023, Livia Silva walked down Augusta Street in downtown São Paulo. Now 23, she had become exactly what she'd dreamed of as a child, an early education teacher at a public school, where she adored her work with 4 and 5-year-olds. Her curly hair now fell to her waist, and those large brown eyes still sparkled whenever she spoke of her students. She lived in a cozy 2-bedroom apartment, splitting the modest rent with her best friend, a nurse. That sunny Thursday afternoon, on her way home from a postgraduate course, she stopped at Cafe Tortoni for an iced cappuccino. It was a place she'd frequented for 2 years, a quiet corner where she could focus on her work. As she looked for a table, she heard a familiar male voice order a double espresso at the counter. The deep, velvety tone made her stop and glance over her shoulder. When her eyes fell on the man's back, clad in an impeccable navy blue suit that clearly cost more than her monthly salary, her heart began to race. Her hands trembled, and for a moment she thought she might faint. Raoul, she whispered, too softly for him to hear over the cafe's chatter. The man turned, searching for a table, and as his deep blue eyes met her brown ones, time simply stopped. 15 years dissolved in a single second. There they were again, two children in a playground, looking at each other as if the world was made only for them. Raul Machado, now 24, had surpassed every expectation. A graduate of Harvard with an MBA from the London School of Economics, he had taken over as vice president of Machado Constructions 2 years earlier. His grandfather's company was now worth over 200 million, and he lived a life of unimaginable luxury. He had become a man who commanded attention wherever he went. Tall, with broad shoulders perfectly framed by an Italian suit, and those same intense blue eyes, now holding a depth that hadn't been there in childhood. I can't believe it's you, Raoul said, abandoning his coffee on the counter and striding toward her. Livia rose from her chair, still in shock. Before she could speak, he pulled her into a tight embrace that lasted far longer than was proper for two friends reuniting after 15 years. Livia, my God, you're so beautiful, he said, his voice thick with an emotion that surprised her. You grew into an incredible woman, just like I always imagined. You've changed a lot too, she managed to reply, trying to hide how fiercely her heart was pounding. When did you come back to Brazil? I moved back for good 2 years ago. Took over the family business, you know how it is, he said, guiding her to a corner table, as if to shield their reunion from the rest of the world. And you? Did you achieve your dream of becoming a teacher? Yes, I work at a public school nearby. I love what I do. Every day is a new discovery with the children, Livia replied, settling her purse on the chair, trying to appear calmer than she felt. Of course you love it. You were always special like that. Always knew exactly what you wanted from life, he said. The affectionate way he spoke made her heart race even faster. They sat down, and the next 2 hours passed like 15 minutes of pure magic. Raoul spoke of his years in Switzerland, of a strict boarding school that had prepared him for the world of business. Then, of England and the United States. He was always studying, always preparing to take over the family company. But he also spoke of a constant loneliness, a feeling that he was always searching for something he couldn't find. You know, Livia, I've traveled the entire world. I've seen incredible places, met important people, learned several languages, but I always felt like something was missing, May, he said, stirring the third cup of coffee he'd ordered just to have an excuse to stay longer with her. What do you mean? She asked, genuinely curious, trying to hide how much his every word affected her. I never found anyone who made me laugh the way you did when we were kids. I never had conversations that felt truly meaningful, that made me feel like I was just me, not the company heir or Machado's son, Raoul explained, looking directly into her eyes in a way that made her feel like the only person in the world. Livia told him about studying education at PUC, how she'd paid for it by working 3 different jobs, helped by a scholarship she'd won for having the best grades in high school. She spoke of the children she taught, how each one had a unique personality that enchanted her every day, and how she had managed to achieve her dream of becoming a teacher, despite coming from a simple family. There's a girl in my class, Sophia, who reminds me of you when you were little, she said, a fond smile gracing her lips as she spoke of the student. Why? Raoul asked, curious and touched by the comparison. She asks these unanswerable questions, like, why doesn't the sky fall on our heads? Or, why do grown-ups get sad when they should be happy? And she has these blue eyes that sparkle with curiosity, just like yours did when you were a child, Livia recounted. Raoul let out a genuine, warm laugh, one she remembered perfectly from their childhood. You were always special to me, too, she said, when he mentioned how good it was to talk with her again. But she didn't have the courage to tell him the whole truth about the love she'd carried for 15 years, about how she'd never been able to fall for another man, because every one of them was compared to the memory of him. Livia, I know this might be strange after so long, but would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow? There's a restaurant in E-Time I'd love for you to see. Or, if you prefer, we can go somewhere simpler, wherever you feel comfortable, Raoul asked, leaning forward, showing a vulnerability she never expected to see in him. I don't know if that's a good idea, Raoul. We live in very different worlds now, she answered, hesitant, afraid of getting hurt. Please, Livia, just one dinner, like two childhood friends catching up. I promise I'll pick you up and take you home safely. And I promise it won't be awkward or uncomfortable, he insisted. There was something in his eyes she couldn't resist. Livia looked at him and saw not the millionaire businessman in an expensive suit and a watch that cost more than her yearly salary, but the 8-year-old boy who had promised to come back for her on the playground 15 years ago. All right, but nothing too fancy, please. I don't have clothes for elegant places, she conceded, a small part of her already regretting it, but unable to say no to him. Whatever you want, Livia. I just want to spend time with you, to get to know the incredible woman you've become, Raoul said, and the smile that spread across his face was the exact same one she had known and secretly loved as a child. When they said goodbye at the cafe's entrance, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange, Raoul held her hand a moment longer than was strictly necessary for friends who had just reconnected. Until tomorrow, Livia, and thank you for waiting for me, even without knowing I'd come back, he said, gently squeezing her fingers before letting go. What do you mean, waiting? She asked, confused, her heart pounding from his touch. I don't know. I just always felt certain that when I came back to Brazil, our paths would cross again, that you'd still be here, that we would find each other, he explained, reluctantly releasing her hand, leaving behind a warmth that she felt all the way home. She stood frozen on the busy sidewalk of Rua Augusta, watching him get into a car that cost more than she would make in 10 years. She felt her quiet, carefully organized life had just been turned upside down in a way that both terrified and thrilled her. 2 weeks after that first dinner, which had turned into a series of almost daily meetings in increasingly simple, cozy places of Livia's choosing, Raoul arrived at her apartment on a Friday night with a different expression on his face. She knew that look from childhood. It was the same one he got when something important was troubling him, and he didn't know how to bring it up. They had planned to watch a movie at her place, a routine they had fallen into after she confessed she preferred quiet nights to the expensive restaurants he frequented, where she felt out of place and watched by other patrons. You seem off tonight, Livia said, pouring the white wine he had brought. It was a bottle that cost far more than her monthly budget for drinks, but he always chose them carefully, thinking of what she might like. Did something happen at the company? She asked, noticing how he paced her small living room, unable to sit down, nervously fidgeting with the gold Rolex on his wrist. She was wearing a simple pair of jeans and a basic white blouse. But to Raoul, she was more beautiful than any elegant woman he had ever seen at the high society events he was forced to attend. Raoul was silent for a few minutes, pacing the small but cozy apartment Livia had decorated with so much care. The walls were adorned with colorful drawings from her students, which she treasured. There were photos of her family in simple frames and stacks of books on a plywood shelf she'd bought at a second-hand furniture store for 50 reais. The contrast between this simple but love-filled space and his cold, modern penthouse, filled with designer furniture and expensive art, was stark, and it made him question so much about his own life. Livia, I need to talk to you about something very serious, he said, finally stopping in front of the small window that overlooked the bustling street. It's about the company, my family, about my future, and maybe about our future too. The grave, emotional tone of his voice made her immediately turn off the old 24-inch television and sit on the edge of her simple sofa, giving him her full attention. Do you remember how I always used to say that one day I would inherit everything from my grandfather? Raoul asked, turning to look directly at her, his blue eyes filled with an anguish she had never seen before. I remember. You said you were going to be the owner of the most important company in Brazil, she replied, trying to lighten the heavy mood that had settled in the room. And isn't that what's happening? Aren't you the vice president of Machado Constructions? I'm the vice president, but it's not that simple, Raoul answered, running a hand through his hair in a nervous gesture she remembered perfectly from childhood. My grandfather, Sebastian, is 82. Last week, the doctors gave him the final diagnosis. He has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He has a year to live, at most. Livia immediately rose from the sofa and went to him, placing her small hand on his strong arm in an instinctive gesture of comfort. Raoul, I am so sorry. I know how much you love your grandfather, how much he means to you, she said with all sincerity, remembering how he used to speak of the man with such admiration when they were children. The problem isn't just his illness, Livia. It's the inheritance. It's much more complicated than I ever imagined, he continued, covering her hand with his own large, warm one, feeling a comfort only she could provide. According to the will he wrote 5 years ago, I can only officially take over the company and inherit the entire estate if I have a legitimate heir, a child to guarantee the continuation of the Machado lineage and the family business. But that's an easy problem to solve, she said, without thinking, not yet understanding where he was going. You're young, handsome, rich, intelligent. Any woman would be happy to marry you and have children. The expression on his face grew even more serious at her words. He took a step back, as if her words had somehow wounded him. It's not that simple, Livia. Why isn't it? She asked, a genuine worry beginning to creep in. Raoul went to the table where the wine sat, poured himself a generous glass, and drank it in one go, as if he needed liquid courage to continue. Last week, along with my grandfather's tests, I had a full physical exam that I'd been putting off for months because of work, he said, avoiding her gaze, focusing on the empty glass. The results showed I have a condition called severe azoospermia, It's a condition where he paused, took a deep breath, and forced the words out. Where I can't have children naturally. The chances are less than 1%. Where you can't have children, Livia completed, her heart twisting with a strange mix of sadness for him and something else she couldn't quite identify. She'd heard of the condition before, but she never imagined it could affect someone so close to her. Exactly. The best fertility specialists in São Paulo confirmed the diagnosis, Raul said, moving closer again. But now with a physical and emotional distance that hadn't been there before. Livia, if I don't have an heir by the end of next year, when my grandfather passes, my cousin Kawan will automatically take over the company. Everything my grandfather built over 60 years, everything my father worked to maintain and expand, will fall into the hands of someone who just wants to sell it all off and divide the money. But there are modern treatments, aren't there? In vitro fertilization, artificial insemination, all that technology? She asked, still trying to process the weight of his confession. There are treatments, but the doctors, they said that in my specific case, because of the severity of the condition, the chances of success are very low. Less than 5%, he explained, taking another deep breath, steeling himself for the hardest part of the conversation. Which is why I've thought of a different alternative, a solution that could work. Raoul looked directly into her brown eyes with an intensity that told her something pivotal was coming. The silence that fell over the room was so heavy, so charged with tension, that Livia could hear the cars passing on the street below, the voices of neighbors on the building's staircase, even the irritating ticking of the wall clock her mother had given her. What kind of alternative? She asked, her voice barely a whisper, a premonition dawning that she would not like the answer. Artificial insemination, with genetic material from an anonymous donor who has physical characteristics similar to mine, Raoul said quickly, as if to get the words out before he lost his nerve. The child would be legally registered as mine, my legitimate heir. I could keep the company and the family and honor my grandfather's legacy, he explained, carefully avoiding her gaze. And the mother of this child? Livia asked. Who would she be? Raoul looked at her with an intensity and a vulnerability that made her understand everything before he spoke another word. I was thinking of you. The words came out as an emotional whisper, but they rang like a shout in the absolute silence of the room. Livia, I trust you more than anyone else in the entire world. You're the only person I know who would do this for the right reasons. Without financial interest, without trying to take advantage of the situation or blackmailing me later, he continued, desperate to make her understand his reasoning. Raoul, she began, but he raised a hand, a silent plea for her to let him finish the speech he had clearly rehearsed. I know it's a lot to ask. I know it's a crazy thing. Something that will completely change your life for the next 9 months. But I was thinking of offering more than fair compensation for your time, for the sacrifices you'll have to make, for the generosity of helping me. He walked over to the desk where he had left an expensive black leather briefcase she hadn't noticed when he'd arrived. 500,000 reais, paid in monthly installments during the pregnancy, plus a 2-bedroom apartment in Pinheiros in your name once the child is born. Livia felt her legs go weak and had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. 500,000 reais was more money than she would earn in 15 years as a public school teacher. It was enough to buy her own apartment in a good neighborhood, to help her parents, who were getting older and still living in their simple little house. She could pursue a specialization abroad if she wanted. She could have financial security for the rest of her life. Raul, that's it's so much money, she managed to say, trying to process a sum she had never imagined seeing. For me, it's not that much. If I lose the company, I'll lose far more. And besides, you deserve much more than that for what you would be doing for me, he replied pragmatically. It's not about the money, she said, trying to organize the thoughts swirling in a complete whirlwind. It's that you're asking me to carry your child, to spend 9 months of my life creating a life inside of me, only to hand them over to you and pretend nothing happened. Livia explained, a strange, inexplicable ache blooming in her chest. It wouldn't be exactly like that. It wouldn't just be handing the baby over and forgetting. Raoul approached her again, cautiously. You wouldn't disappear from the child's life. You could visit whenever you wanted. You could be a part of their life, an important presence. You'd be like a very special, beloved aunt. An aunt, she repeated, the ache in her chest intensifying until it was almost unbearable. Here was the man she had loved in silence since childhood, the man who had made it impossible for her to fall for anyone else, asking her to carry his child, not out of love, not because he wanted to build a family with her, but out of necessity, out of business, out of convenience. Raoul, have you ever stopped to think that maybe it would be better to find someone you truly love? Someone who wants to marry you and build a real family? She asked, knowing she was being masochistic by even suggesting it, but needing to hear his answer. Livia, I don't have time to find someone, fall in love, date, get engaged, get married. My grandfather has a year to live at most, he explained, running a hand through his hair in that familiar nervous gesture. And besides, I don't want to get married out of obligation. I don't want to bring a woman into my life just because I need an heir. It would be unfair to her and to me. But it wouldn't be unfair to me? Livia asked, her voice cracking with emotion. With you, it's different. Completely different. We've known each other forever since we were kids. You know who I really am, not just the rich businessman. And I trust you. I trust you would take good care of the child, that you would love them, even knowing they wouldn't be with you forever. Livia closed her eyes, trying to imagine it. 9 months, carrying the child of the man she loved, feeling them grow inside her, talking to them every night, creating a connection that would be severed the moment of birth. I need to think, she said finally. This is a huge decision that will affect the rest of my life in ways I can't even begin to imagine. Of course you do. Take all the time you need. Raoul stepped closer and took her small hands in his. But Livia, if you agree to this, you would be the most important person in my life. I would be eternally grateful, and I will make sure you never, ever regret this decision. That night, long after Raoul had gone, and she was alone in the silent apartment, Livia lay awake until the sun rose. She thought about the boy she had met in the playground 15 years ago, the incredible man he had become, and the love she had carried in silence for so long. It had become a part of her, and she thought that maybe this was the only chance she would ever have to be a real part of his life, to have a small piece of him forever, even if it was in a way no one else would ever know. On Monday morning, With trembling hands and a racing heart, she called his cell phone. Raul, it's me, Livia. I accept your proposal. The following Thursday, after the phone call that changed everything, Livia found herself sitting in the law offices of Miranda and Associates. It was located on the 30th floor of an imposing skyscraper on Faria Lima Avenue, where every square meter was worth more than her entire house, and the reverent silence was broken only by the distant hum of traffic below. Dr. Eduardo Miranda, a distinguished man of 55 with impeccably combed gray hair, a suit that cost 15,000 reais, and a flawless reputation among Sao Paulo's elite, was meticulously explaining each clause of the contract Raul had prepared with the utmost discretion and absolute secrecy. So, Miss Silva, let us review the principal terms of this agreement, Dr. Miranda said in a professional tone, adjusting his 8,000 reais Cartier glasses and opening a genuine Italian leather folder. Mr. Raul Machado commits to paying the total sum of 500,000 reais, divided into monthly installments of 55,500 reais over the 9 months of gestation. Additionally, he will fully cover all medical expenses, including a premium Amil health plan at 2,500 reais a month, consultations with Sao Paulo's finest specialists, all routine and emergency examinations, imported vitamins, supplements, in short, everything necessary to ensure a healthy pregnancy. Livia tried to hang on to every word, but the numbers were so surreal, so astronomical, that her mind struggled to process them. Raoul sat beside her in an Italian leather armchair that probably cost more than all the furniture in her apartment combined. He wore a 12,000 reais charcoal gray Brioni suit, and she could smell the expensive, sophisticated cologne he wore. Tom Ford's Oud Wood, an 1800 reais bottle of a woody, striking scent that made her a little dizzy whenever he was near. Livia, do you have any questions about the clauses so far? He asked gently, noticing she was quieter than usual, looking a little lost amidst the formality and complicated legal jargon. It's just a lot of information at once, she answered honestly, glancing at the thick 22-page document filled with complex legal terms she could barely comprehend. You will also receive a 2-bedroom, 2-suite apartment in the noble Pinheiros district, a highly valued area of the city, appraised at 400,000 reais. It will be definitively transferred to your civil name on the day of the child's birth, with all necessary legal documentation, Dr. Miranda continued, turning the pages of the contract with precise movements. Throughout the entire gestational period, which we estimate at 9 months, you will relocate to Mr. Machado's primary residence in Morumbi. There, you will have a fully furnished master suite with a private bathroom, a private living area, as well as unrestricted access to a specialized domestic staff, a private driver available 24 hours, a renowned nutritionist, a personal trainer specializing in pregnancy, and an on-call obstetric nurse for any emergency. The idea of living in Raoul's luxurious house for 9 whole months still made Livia nervous, but she had already mentally accepted the changes it would bring to her life. There are also some important restrictions during the gestational period that must be clarified and signed, Dr. Miranda read in a firm, professional voice, as if he were accustomed to handling such contracts. No alcoholic beverages of any kind, no cigarettes or smoking of any type, No high-risk physical activities, such as running or heavy weightlifting. No travel outside the state without prior medical authorization. And no medication without a prescription from the responsible obstetrician. Each restriction sounded like a golden handcuff, but Livia understood the necessity. And it is fundamental to clarify that the child will be registered as the legitimate child of Mr. Machado from birth. You, Miss Silva, will be listed as the biological mother on the documents, but you will formally renounce legal custody and all parental rights, transferring them entirely to the father. The clause hit Livia like a violent blow to the stomach, even though she knew this was how it would work. Hearing it spoken aloud, officially, made it all the more real, more painful, more final. May I have a few minutes alone to process this? Livia asked, her voice weaker than usual. She felt suffocated in that luxurious room, filled with cold formality, complicated contracts, and life-altering decisions. Naturally, Miss Silva, I'll fetch some special Colombian coffee for you, Dr. Miranda said, with refined politeness, discreetly exiting the room and leaving the two of them alone for the first time since they had arrived. As soon as the heavy door closed, Raoul immediately rose from his armchair and came to her, taking her small hands with extreme care, as if she were made of the most fragile crystal. Livia, I know this all seems very formal, very cold, very transactional, but it's just to protect us legally, to ensure there are no problems or misunderstandings in the future, he said, his voice much softer, warmer, and more human than it had been in the lawyer's presence. You know it won't be like this between us, right? You know I care about you deeply, that you're not just a business deal or an employee to me. I know you care, she replied, though a confused part of her still wondered if he cared about her or just about her ability to solve his urgent problem. It's just, all of this is so different from my simple, organized life. I never imagined I'd be living in a mansion, having a private driver. All these luxurious things that are normal for you are completely surreal to me. You'll get used to it faster than you think, I promise. And remember, it's not forever. It's only 9 months of your life, Raoul said, squeezing her hands reassuringly. After that, you'll have complete financial independence, your own apartment, and you can do absolutely anything you want with your life. You can travel the world, study abroad, start your own school, any dream you've ever had. The way he said it sounded as though he was already planning for her departure once he got what he wanted, and that hurt more than she was prepared to feel. And you? What will you do after you have your heir? She asked, trying not to reveal how much the question tormented her. I'll take care of the child, run the company, honor my family's legacy, he replied, but something in his tone didn't sound entirely convincing. When Dr. Miranda returned with the Colombian coffee, which cost 50 reis a kilo, Livia signed the contract with visibly shaking hands. Each stroke of the pen felt like a piece of her old, simple life slipping away forever, replaced by a new and frightening reality. Congratulations to you both. Now we can proceed with the necessary medical arrangements, the lawyer said with a professional smile, placing the important documents into a secure briefcase. Dr. Henrique Castello, a renowned specialist in assisted reproduction from the Mater Prime Clinic, is already expecting you next Thursday at 10 in the morning for the first consultation and to plan the procedure. On the way out of the office, sitting inside Raoul's 300,000 reis Mercedes-Benz S-Class with its beige leather interior, they were silent for several long minutes, Joaquim, the 60-year-old chauffeur who had worked for the family for 15 years and earned 4,000 reais a month, drove calmly through the heavy, chaotic traffic of Faria Lima. Are you regretting it? Raul finally asked, noticing her pensive, melancholic expression as she stared out the tinted window. I don't know yet. It's all happening so fast. It's so much change all at once, she answered honestly, watching the tall, expensive buildings slide by like scenery in a movie. Livia, I want you to know something important. Even after signing the contract, you can change your mind at any time if you don't feel right about this, he said, completely surprising her. Really? Even after everything's been signed? Completely serious. I don't want you to do this if you're not 100% certain and comfortable. It would be unfair to me, to you, and especially to the child, Raul explained. And for the first time since he had made his insane proposal, she saw a genuine glimmer of vulnerability, of humanity in him. A week later, at the Mater Prime Clinic in the upscale Hardins neighborhood, one of the most prestigious assisted reproduction clinics in Latin America, Dr. Enrique Costello explained the entire artificial insemination process with the patience and professionalism of someone who had done it thousands of times over a 20-year career. The clinic charged 15,000 reais per attempt, and Raul had paid for 3 complete cycles in advance, just in case the first was not successful. The procedure itself was simpler and less invasive than Livia had imagined, performed in a sterile, white room with state-of-the-art equipment imported from Germany. 2 weeks after the procedure, on a sunny Tuesday morning that began like any other, Livia woke up with a strange, unfamiliar nausea, unlike anything she had ever felt before. She rushed to the apartment's bathroom and retched up the red berry smoothie she'd had for breakfast. Could it be? She whispered to herself, looking in the mirror and touching her still flat stomach. The next day, she took the pregnancy test at the Fleury Laboratory in the elegant Hygienopolis neighborhood, accompanied by Raul. He had canceled 2 multi-million real meetings to be there for this crucial moment. When Dr. Costello called them into his private office and said, "Congratulations, the beta HCG is positive. You're pregnant," Raul's face broke into a smile. He stared at the lab report for long seconds, as if unable to process the information, then looked at Livia, his blue eyes shining with an intensity she had never seen before. "We did it," he whispered. And for a magical moment, she almost forgot this was a business arrangement. The genuine, thrilling joy on his face was contagious, and she found herself smiling too. Despite all the complications and uncertainties this pregnancy represented for her future. The following Saturday, Livia officially moved into the Machado mansion on Alameda dos Jacarandas. The house was even more impressive and luxurious than she remembered from childhood. An imposing, 3-story facade, vast and perfectly manicured gardens that seemed to have sprung from the pages of a magazine, a sapphire blue pool that rivaled a 5-star resort, and a staff that moved silently to keep everything in absolute perfection. Her room was on the second floor, decorated with classic furniture in soft tones of beige and gold. It featured a king-sized bed larger than her entire old living room and a breathtaking view of the garden that stole her breath away every morning. "Mrs. Carmen will take care of all your meals, always keeping the pregnancy's nutritional needs in mind," Raul explained, introducing her to the cook, a kind woman in her 50s who had been with the family for 2 decades. Anything you want to eat, any strange cravings, just ask her. Thank you, Mrs. Carmen, Livia said, trying to be polite despite feeling completely out of place in such a lavish environment. Of course, my dear child, it will be a pleasure to take care of you and the baby, the woman replied, with a genuine maternal smile that put her slightly at ease. On her first night in the mansion, Livia dined alone in the formal dining room, which could seat 12. She ate grilled salmon with asparagus, specially prepared by Mrs. Carmen with the vitamins needed for the pregnancy in mind. Raul was in an important business meeting that had run late into the night. The loneliness in the vast, silent house was deafening and heavy, a stark contrast to her small but lively apartment, which was always filled with Fernanda's laughter. When Raul finally came home around 11, he found her on the bedroom balcony, gazing at the stars and the full moon in São Paulo's clear sky. "How was your first day here?" he asked gently, approaching her on the spacious terrace. "Strange. Everything is so beautiful, so perfect, so luxurious, but—" She paused, searching for the right words, not wanting to sound ungrateful. "But it doesn't feel real?" he finished, showing he understood exactly what she was feeling. "Exactly. It feels like I'm living someone else's life, like an actress in a high-budget film. You'll get used to it in time, and I'll try to be more present, I promise. I'm just sorting out some urgent company matters so I can dedicate more time to the pregnancy," Raul said, and there was a sincerity in his voice that made her believe he truly cared about her well-being and that of the baby growing inside her. The first few weeks of pregnancy were more challenging than Livia had imagined. The morning sickness was constant and intense, sometimes lasting all day, and she lost 3 kilos because she couldn't keep any solid food down for more than a few hours. Dr. Paulo Andrade, the renowned obstetrician Raul had hired, whose private consultations cost a small fortune, said it was completely normal, but prescribed some imported medications and special supplements to alleviate the most uncomfortable symptoms. What surprised her most was how attentive and caring Raul proved to be, far beyond what she expected from someone merely fulfilling a contract. Every morning, before leaving for work, he would knock gently on her door to ask how she had slept and how she was feeling. "Did you sleep well? Is the nausea any better today?" he would ask, always with the same genuine concern in his voice. And when she said yes, he would smile in a way that lit up his entire face. One morning, when she mentioned she dearly missed the warm, sweet bread from the bakery near her old apartment, he had his driver, Joachim, fetch 10 fresh ones every morning at 6. When she commented that she missed talking to the children at school, he suggested she work only part-time to avoid getting too tired. "You don't have to do all these things for me," Livia said, one hot Thursday afternoon, when he came home carrying a basket of expensive organic fruit she had casually mentioned looked delicious in a magazine ad. "Do what?" Raul asked, looking genuinely confused, as if these caring gestures were the most natural thing in the world. "Take care of me as if I were special to you. As if you really cared about me," she explained, feeling vulnerable and exposed for being so direct. "But you are special to me, Livia," he replied without a second's hesitation. "You've always been special, ever since we were kids on the playground." In the 12th week of pregnancy, they had the first ultrasound at Dr. Andrade's private clinic, located in the Albert Einstein Hospital, one of Sao Paulo's most prestigious and expensive. Livia lay on the cushioned table, her belly exposed and the cool, clear gel spread across her skin, which was already starting to round slightly. Raoul held her hand, gazing fascinated at the state-of-the-art monitor. "There's your baby," Dr. Andrade said with a professional smile, pointing to a small, moving figure on the black and white screen. "You can see the head here, the little arms forming here, and the legs here." Raoul was silent for long seconds, staring at the screen as if witnessing the greatest miracle in the universe. Livia saw genuine tears welling in his blue eyes and felt her own heart ache in a way that was both painful and sweet. "It's so tiny, but so perfectly formed," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Everything is just right, perfect. Heartbeat is normal and strong. Size is appropriate for the gestational age. Development is right on track," Dr. Andrade explained, printing several ultrasound photos. "Do you want to know the sex? It's not 100% certain yet, but from the position and what I can see, it looks like it might be a boy." "A boy," Raoul repeated slowly, as if testing the sound of the word on his tongue. He squeezed Livia's hand, his eyes never leaving the screen. "Livia, are you seeing this? That's our son growing in there." The natural, tender way he said "our" made her forget, for a few moments, that this was temporary, that it was just a contract. For a few magical seconds, she allowed herself to imagine they were a normal, loving couple, expecting their first child, planning their future together as a real family. From that day on, Raoul's interest in the pregnancy grew beyond anything Livia had expected from someone merely fulfilling a cold, commercial agreement. He bought every book on pregnancy and child development he could find, spending a small fortune on national and imported literature. "Did you know that at 16 weeks, the baby can already hear our voices and recognize familiar sounds?" he asked one evening at dinner, after spending the entire afternoon engrossed in a thick book on fetal development. "I didn't know that," she replied, finding his growing enthusiasm both strange and incredibly sweet. "Maybe we should talk to him every day. The books say it's very important for the child's neurological and emotional development," Raoul suggested, sounding genuinely excited by the idea. "You want to talk to the baby?" Livia asked, surprised, but touched by the tender suggestion. "If you'll let me, if you don't think it's weird." The sincere vulnerability in his voice disarmed her completely. "Of course I'll let you. I think that would be beautiful." That night, for the first time since she had moved in, Raoul entered her bedroom. Livia was lying comfortably in the enormous bed, reading a book of children's stories she'd bought to start reading to the baby, when he knocked gently. "May I come in?" he asked politely. "You can," she said, closing the book and shifting in bed, suddenly nervous at his presence in her intimate space. Raoul approached hesitantly, as if entering a sacred, private space. "How do we do this? How do you talk to a baby that's still inside its mother's belly?" he asked, sitting carefully on the edge of the king-sized bed. "I don't know. I guess we just talk normally." As if he could understand everything, Livia replied, not entirely sure herself. "You can put your hand on my belly if you want," she offered, surprising herself with the natural intimacy of the gesture. Raoul looked at her, silently asking for permission one more time. When she nodded with an encouraging smile, he gently placed his large, warm hand on her belly, which was already starting to become firm and round. "Hi, baby," he said, his voice soft and tender. "I am your daddy. I know it's too early for you to really understand me, but I wanted you to know that I already love you so, so much. Livia felt her eyes fill with tears as she saw the genuine tenderness on his face, as she heard the real emotion in his voice. Your mommy is the most special, most incredible person in the entire world, Raul continued, looking lovingly at Livia as he spoke to the baby. She's brave and smart and generous, and she has the most beautiful, pure heart I've ever known. You're so lucky to have her taking care of you with so much love. The emotional, sincere way he spoke made Livia's heart race in a way it hadn't for a long time. There was something in his voice that went far beyond gratitude or simple childhood friendship. Raoul, she began, but she didn't know what she wanted to say. Sorry if this is strange or inappropriate, he said, carefully removing his hand from her belly. It's not strange. It's it's very beautiful and very moving, she admitted honestly. You're going to be an amazing, loving father. You really think so? I'm absolutely certain. Remember when we were kids and you always said you wanted to take care of everyone? You've always had that natural, protective instinct. That night, after Raoul left her room, Livia lay awake for a long time, thinking about the subtle but significant shift happening between them. This was no longer just the formal fulfillment of a business contract. Something else was growing here, something that went far beyond the child she carried in her womb. And that scared her more than any nausea or physical change the pregnancy could bring. In the weeks that followed, the nightly conversations with the baby became a sacred ritual. Raoul would appear in her room every night after dinner, around 9 o'clock, and they would talk lovingly to the belly that grew bigger each day. He told it about his work, about his ambitious plans for the company's future, about the beautiful places in the world he wanted to show his child. Livia talked about her beloved students, about the children's books she was reading, about how anxious and excited she was to finally meet the baby. Have you thought about names? Raoul asked one evening, when she was 18 weeks along and her belly was impossible to hide. A few nice ones. You? For a boy, I've always liked Gabriel, and for a girl, Sophia. Gabriel is beautiful and has a lovely meaning, and I have a student named Sophia. The one I told you reminds me of you when you were little, Livia commented fondly. Then she must be very special and smart. She is very special. Gabriel and Sophia, he repeated thoughtfully. Gabriel Machado or Sophia Machado. The natural way he said the family surname brought Livia to a painful realization. There was truly a child growing inside her who would carry his name, who would officially be his child in the eyes of the law and society, while she would be left with only the memories of the most intense and contradictory 9 months of her life. At the 20-week scan, during the detailed morphological ultrasound, they officially discovered it was indeed a healthy, perfect boy. Gabriel, Raoul said instantly, as soon as Dr. Andrade confirmed the sex with absolute certainty. And Livia watched as pure emotion washed over his face in a way that made her fall for him even more. Gabriel Machado. That night, he came home carrying a special gift, a baby blue teddy bear from an expensive imported toy store with the name Gabriel lovingly embroidered on its chest. For our boy, he said, gently placing the teddy bear in her lap. Ours? She repeated softly, knowing how dangerous, how painful it was to get used to that possessive word. Yet, she was utterly powerless against the warm, wonderful feeling it sparked in her love-struck heart. And in that intimate moment, with Raoul sitting beside her on the bed, talking excitedly to Gabriel about soccer and how he would teach his son to swim in the big pool at the house, Livia allowed herself to daydream of an alternate reality, a reality where they were truly a family, where the love she had harbored for 15 years was finally returned, where Gabriel would grow up with two parents who loved him, together, forever, without contracts or business deals between them. As the months passed, the thin line between their professional arrangement and something far more profound began to blur. Raoul would cancel important meetings to accompany her to medical appointments. He started coming home earlier for dinner, always finding an excuse to spend more time talking with her and with Gabriel. Livia began to notice a change in his gaze. It was more intense, more tender, as if he were seeing something in her he'd never noticed before. And she, who had loved him for 15 years, felt her heart open even wider to a man who was proving to be more attentive and caring than any boyfriend she had ever had. In the 26th week of pregnancy, on a rainy Thursday night that began like any other, everything between Livia and Raoul changed in a way neither of them was prepared for. She was in her room, nestled comfortably in bed, reading a book on child development, when she heard the front door close and his familiar footsteps ascending the stairs. It was almost 10 at night, later than usual, and she could tell by his heavy breathing that he was exhausted after a long, stressful day at the company. "Livia?" he called, knocking gently on her bedroom door, as he did every night. "Can I come in? I know it's late, but I wanted to talk to Gabriel before bed." "Of course," she replied, marking her page and shifting in the bed. When he entered, she immediately saw that something was different. His suit was rumpled, his tie loosened, and his hair disheveled. In his blue eyes, she saw an intensity she had never seen before. "Did something happen at work?" she asked, worried by the heavy expression on his face. "Nothing major, just some difficult meetings with investors," Raoul answered, sitting on the edge of the bed with a heavy sigh. "Livia, can I tell you something? Something I've never told anyone?" The intimate, vulnerable tone in his voice made her sit up, giving him her full attention. "Of course. You can tell me anything." Today, during the most important meeting of the day, with Japanese investors who could change the future of the company, I found myself thinking about you, he said, looking directly into her eyes, wondering how you were feeling, if you were eating properly, if Gabriel was moving much. And I realized this has been happening for weeks. I can't focus on work anymore because my mind is always here, with you too. Livia felt her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with the pregnancy. "Raoul," she began, but he raised a hand, asking her to wait. "Let me finish, please. Because if I don't say this now, I'll never find the courage," he said, running a nervous hand through his hair. "Livia, when I made that proposal to you, I thought I could keep everything professional, that it would just be an agreement between friends, a practical solution to my problem." He paused, took a deep breath, and looked at her with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. "But I couldn't. With every day that passes, every conversation we have with Gabriel, every time I see you caring for our son with so much love, I've fallen in love with you." The silence that followed was absolute, charged with electricity. Livia stared at him, trying to process the words she had dreamed of hearing for 15 years. "Are you serious?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Completely serious. I love you, Livia. Not as the mother of my child, not as a friend who is doing me a gigantic favor. I love you as a woman, as the person I want by my side for the rest of my life." The words were so laden with emotion that she felt tears welling in her eyes. "Raul, you can't say this now," she said, trying to shield her heart. "I'm 6 months pregnant, full of hormones, living in your house, depending on your money. Don't you think you might be confusing gratitude with love?" "I'm not confusing anything," he replied, moving closer to her on the bed. "I loved you before you agreed to carry Gabriel. I just hadn't realized it until you came back into my life." "What do you mean you hadn't realized it?" she asked, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Remember when I said I always felt like I was searching for something that only existed in my past?" Raoul asked, taking her hands in his. "I was talking about you. For all these years, I was looking for you in every woman I met, but I didn't see it until you came back into my life, and I remembered what true happiness felt like." "That's very convenient, Raoul," she said, still trying to protect herself, even as her heart melted. "You realize you love me just when I'm carrying your son?" "Livia, I know how it sounds, but it sounds like something you're saying to keep me happy until Gabriel is born," she interrupted, though every fiber of her being wanted to believe him. "To make sure I don't cause any problems or change my mind." "That's not it," Raoul said, getting up and beginning to pace the room. "You want proof? Tear up the contract. Marry me. Let's raise Gabriel together as a real family, with no agreements or papers signed between us." The proposal took her completely by surprise. "What?" "You heard me. I don't care about the money, the apartment, any of it. I just want you and our son. I want to wake up next to you every day. I want to take care of you through this pregnancy. I want to be there for every moment of Gabriel's life." "Our son?" she repeated, testing the words. "Since when is he our son? Yesterday he was your heir to keep the company." "He was always ours, Livia, from the moment he was conceived. From the first time I put my hand on your belly and felt him move," Raoul said, returning to her side and kneeling by the bed. "I know I hurt you with this whole contract business, but it was the only way I could think of to have you in my life without risking our friendship. I was too much of a coward to just admit that I've been in love with you since we reconnected." The tears Livia had been holding back finally streamed down her face. "Raoul, she started, but he gently placed a finger on her lips. "Before you answer, there's something I should have told you a long time ago," he said, his voice growing even softer. "Livia, I never forgot you. For all these 15 years, I carried the memory of that girl with curly hair who made me laugh at the playground. And when I saw you in that cafe, it was like a part of me that had been dormant woke up again." "I never forgot you either," she confessed for the first time, her voice cracking with emotion. "I've loved you since I was 8 years old, Raoul. I could never fall for another man because they were all compared to you. When you made that proposal, I accepted, not for the money, but because it was the only way I could see to be a part of your life, even if only for 9 months." The confession poured out, a flood of feelings held back for 15 years. "You love me?" he asked, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Always. Since that day at the playground, when you said we could work together forever. I love you so much it hurts, Raoul," she said, touching his face with her hand. I agreed to be just auntie to Gabrielle because I'd rather have a small piece of you than nothing at all. Raoul looked at her for a moment that felt like an eternity, then leaned in and kissed her. A soft, tender kiss, as if she were made of glass. It was their first, after 15 years of waiting, and it tasted of happy tears and dreams come true. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. Then cancel the contract with me. Let's do this the right way. You, me, and Gabriel as a real family. What if it doesn't work out? What if you get tired of me after the novelty wears off? She asked, voicing the fears she had carried for so long. That won't happen. How can you be so sure? Because I've loved you for 15 years, Livia. It just took me a while to understand. And because when I see you taking care of Gabriel, when I hear you singing to him, talking to him, I see my entire future. That night, after hours of talking about buried feelings, old fears, and shared dreams, something between them shifted definitively. Livia settled into the large bed, and for the first time since she had moved in, Raoul didn't leave the room. Can I stay here with you tonight? He asked, a vulnerability in his voice that moved her. Just to be by your side, to look after you and Gabriel. I want you to stay, she replied, making space for him. They lay down together, he on top of the covers, to respect her space, talking in the dark about everything and nothing. He told her about the nights he'd spent thinking of her over the years, about how he could never truly fall for any other woman. She told him about keeping their childhood photo in her drawer, about dreaming of him marrying other people, and how much it hurt. Livia, he called softly, well past 2 in the morning. Can I touch your belly? I want to feel Gabriel. She took his hand and placed it on her rounded stomach. As if on cue, Gabriel moved vigorously. I think he knows his daddy is here, she whispered. I think he approves of us being together, Raoul said, kissing her neck gently. The kiss on her neck turned into soft caresses on her face, which deepened into more intense kisses, which grew into something far more profound and intimate. Are you sure? He asked, when he realized where this was leading. I'm absolutely sure. I love you, and I want to give myself to you completely, she replied, pulling him closer. They made love that night slowly, tenderly, full of feeling, always mindful of her pregnancy, but connecting in a way that went far beyond the physical. It was the union of two souls that had been searching for each other for 15 years and had finally found their way home. Every touch was a declaration of love, every kiss a promise for the future, every whispered endearment a confirmation that this was forever. When the sun rose the next morning, they woke up in each other's arms, with Gabriel stirring softly in her womb, as if happy with their new reality. Good morning, my love, Raoul whispered, kissing her forehead. Good morning, she replied, still not believing it was real. Are you still sure you want to cancel the contract? More sure than ever. I want to be your husband, not your contractor. I want to be Gabriel's father, not just his legal guardian. That morning, they called their lawyer, requesting an urgent meeting to cancel all commercial terms of their agreement. Are you absolutely certain about this decision? The lawyer asked, surprised. Absolutely, Raoul replied, holding Livia's hand. We want to get married and build a real family. And so, what began as a cold business arrangement transformed into the greatest love either of them had ever known, proving that sometimes destiny takes the most unexpected paths to unite two people who were always meant for each other. 3 weeks after that life-altering night, as Livia, now 29 weeks pregnant, was getting used to her new reality as Raul's fiancée, and not just the contracted mother of his child, an unexpected phone call shattered the happiness they had built together. It was a sunny Tuesday morning. They were having breakfast in the garden, planning the intimate wedding they wanted to have before Gabriel was born, when Raul's phone rang. The screen displayed the name of Dr. Henrique Castello, the assisted reproduction specialist. Dr. Castello, has something happened? Raul answered, a note of concern in his voice. They weren't expecting a call from the doctor. Livia continued eating her pastry, watching as his expression changed drastically during the conversation. What do you mean, an error at the lab? What kind of error? She heard him ask, his voice growing tense. Mr. Machado, it would be best if you came to the clinic urgently. There is something very important I need to explain in person. The doctor's voice was loud enough for her to hear. An hour later, they were sitting in Dr. Costello's elegant office at the Mater Prime Clinic. Livia held Raul's hand, trying to control the anxiety rising in her chest. Mr. Machado, Mrs. Livia, I must inform you of a serious error we discovered while reviewing old records, the doctor said, his grim expression a dark premonition. The fertility exams you took a few months ago were switched at the lab. Those results, the ones indicating severe azoospermia, they were never yours. The silence in the room was absolute. Raul stared at the doctor as if he hadn't quite understood. What do you mean they weren't mine? There was a sample mix-up at the third-party lab we were using at the time. Your actual results, which we found today during an internal audit, show perfectly normal fertility parameters. In fact, Dr. Costello explained, handing him a folder with the correct reports. Your counts are above average for a man your age. You can have children naturally. You always could have. Livia felt the world crumble around her. So you're saying he never needed the artificial insemination? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Technically, no. With these parameters, the chances of natural conception are very high. The doctor confirmed. We will, of course, be suing the laboratory responsible for the error, and we want to formally apologize for the distress this has caused you. But Livia barely heard the apology. Her mind was racing in 1,000 different directions, all leading to the same devastating conclusion. The drive home in the silent Mercedes was heavy with unspoken words. Raul tried a few times to start a conversation, but she answered only in monosyllables, her gaze fixed on the window as she processed the life-altering revelation. Livia, are you okay? He asked as they arrived at the mansion. I'm fine, she replied, but the cold, distant tone of her voice said the exact opposite. I'm just going to go up and rest for a bit. Livia, we need to talk about this, Raul said, following her into the bedroom. I know it's a shock, but it doesn't change anything between us. Doesn't change anything? She turned to face him, her eyes flashing with a dangerous light. Raul, you can have children. You always could have. That changes everything. How does it change everything? We love each other. We're getting married. Gabriel is on his way. None of that has changed. You don't need me, she said, sitting on the bed and placing her hands on her belly. You never did. You can find any woman, fall in love for real, get married, and have as many children as you want. The tears began to trace paths down her cheeks. I'm just a mistake, Raul. A mistake that became convenient when you thought you were in love. You are not a mistake, and I don't think I'm in love. I know I am, he said, moving closer to her. How can you be sure? How can you know if it's real love or just gratitude because I solved your problem? She asked, pulling away as he tried to touch her. Maybe you just fell in love with the idea of a ready-made family, with the ease of not having to look for someone. Livia, you're talking nonsense. I've loved you since we were kids. No, you love the memory of a child. You fell in love with a convenient situation. That afternoon, while Raoul was at his office dealing with the legal fallout with the lab, Livia received an unexpected visit. Cawan, Raoul's cousin, appeared at the mansion's door, accompanied by Bruna, Raoul's executive assistant. Livia, isn't it? I need to talk to you about something very important, Cawan said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Raoul isn't here, she replied, trying to close the door. Actually, it's you I want to talk to, about the awkward situation you found yourself in. What awkward situation? Haven't you heard the news? That Raoul was never sterile? Bruna asked, her tone sweet but laced with venom. We found out today, Livia answered, forcing herself to maintain composure. Then you know he doesn't need you anymore, Cawan said, stepping into the house uninvited. He can have children with anyone. Bruna here, for example, has always been in love with him. Now that you've served your purpose, perhaps it's time to make a dignified exit. What are you implying? Livia asked, though deep down, she already knew where the conversation was headed. We're offering you an elegant way out, Bruna said, pulling an envelope from her expensive handbag. 5 million reais for you to disappear from Raoul's life. Have the baby, give him to Raoul, as per the original contract, and vanish forever. He'll get over this little infatuation quickly enough once you're not around to remind him of the mistake that was made. 5 million? Livia repeated, stunned by the amount. He would never pay that. He doesn't have to know. I have an inheritance I don't use, Cawan explained. Consider it an investment in the family's future. You'll have enough money to live like a queen for the rest of your life, far from here. And Raoul will be free to find someone of his own social standing, someone who truly suits him. You're insane if you think I'm going to accept this, Livia said. But a part of her, the insecure part that had always been there, was listening to every word. Think about it, Livia, Bruna said, stepping closer. Do you really think a man like Raoul will want to stay with a poor little school teacher for the rest of his life? He's confused now, but once the novelty wears off, he'll realize you have nothing in common besides a child. Get out of my house, Livia ordered, but her voice lacked firmness. Our house, Cawan corrected her. This is the Machado family home. You're just a temporary guest who's deluding herself into thinking she's become part of the family. He placed the envelope on the table. The money will be available until tomorrow night. After that, the offer expires, and you'll have to find your own way out. After they left, Livia stared at the envelope on the table as if it were a bomb about to detonate. 5 million reais. It was a sum she had never imagined seeing in her lifetime. Enough to buy a large house, travel the world, give Gabriel a comfortable life if he wanted to visit her sometimes. And most importantly, it would be a way to free Raoul to be happy with someone from his world, someone who truly deserved to be with such a special man. When Raoul came home that night, he found Livia in the bedroom, packing a suitcase. What are you doing? He asked, alarmed. "I'm leaving," she answered without looking at him, carefully folding her maternity clothes. "What do you mean you're leaving? We haven't even talked this through yet." "There's nothing to talk about, Raul. You can have children with anyone. You don't have to stay with me out of obligation." "Obligation? Livia, I love you. This has nothing to do with obligation," he said, grabbing her clothes and tossing them back on the bed. "Do you love me, or do you love the idea of a ready-made family?" she asked, finally meeting his eyes. "Answer me honestly. If you had known from the beginning that you could have children naturally, would you have fallen in love with me?" The question caught him off guard, and the 2-second hesitation in his response was enough to confirm her worst fears. "You hesitated," she said, her voice breaking. "You hesitated because you know you might not have even noticed me if you didn't need me." "It wasn't hesitation. It was just, it's a complicated question," Raul tried to explain. "It's not complicated. It's yes or no. Would you have fallen for a poor school teacher if you didn't need her to carry your child?" His silence was more eloquent than any answer. "I'll stay at Fernanda's until Gabriel is born," Livia said, resuming her packing. "We can talk about his visitation schedule after that." "Livia, please, don't do this. We can work this out." "The only thing that needs working out is me, and I'm working myself out," she replied, closing the suitcase. "You'll find someone better, Raul. Someone who truly deserves to be in your life." "You're the one who deserves to be in my life," he said. But she was already heading down the stairs, suitcase in hand. "Livia, come back. We need to talk about this." But she didn't turn back. She hailed the first taxi she saw on the street and disappeared into the São Paulo night, taking Gabriel with her and leaving Raul alone in the empty mansion, realizing too late that he had just lost the only thing that truly mattered. At Fernanda's small house, Livia cried until she had no tears left, held by her best friend, who tried to console her. "You did the right thing," Fernanda said, stroking her hair. "If he really loves you, he'll come after you and prove it. And if he doesn't, then it wasn't meant to be." But deep down, Livia prayed he would come, that he would prove their love was real and not just the result of convenient circumstances that had thrown them together. For the next 2 weeks, Raul tried to contact Livia every day, but she ignored his calls and messages. He sent flowers to Fernanda's house, gifts for Gabriel, handwritten letters explaining his feelings, but she returned everything, unopened. At the office, he couldn't concentrate, canceling important meetings and spending hours staring out his window, wondering how he had let the woman he loved slip away over a foolish hesitation. "Son, you need to go after her," his grandfather Sebastian said one afternoon, finding him completely dejected in his office. "How are you feeling, Grandpa?" Raul asked, trying to change the subject. "I'm dying, Raul, but we're not talking about me," the old man said, settling into the expensive armchair. "Do you love that girl?" "More than life itself." "Then stop being a coward and go get her before it's too late." In the 33rd week of her pregnancy, on a rainy Friday pre-dawn, Livia woke to a strange, intense pain in her abdomen. "Fernanda!" she screamed, realizing she was bleeding. Her friend, a nurse, rushed into the room and, seeing the situation, immediately called for an ambulance. "It's too early. The baby can't be born now," Livia said in a total panic. "It's going to be okay. We're going to the hospital." Fernanda tried to calm her, though she was worried too. At the hospital, Dr. Andrade examined Livia and gave the diagnosis she most feared. We have to deliver now. The placenta is detaching. If we wait, we could lose both mother and baby. But he's only 33 weeks, she sobbed. Babies at 33 weeks have an excellent chance of survival. Gabriel will be fine, the doctor assured her. But I need to notify the father. It's crucial that he be here. Please call Raul, Livia begged Fernanda, realizing she needed him now more than anything in the world. Tell him Gabriel is coming. Fernanda made the call, and in less than 15 minutes, Raul burst into the hospital like a hurricane, still in his pajamas, his hair disheveled, and his eyes wide with desperation. How is she? How's Gabriel? He asked Fernanda, who rushed him toward the surgical center. Raul, Livia called out when she saw him entering the prep room, dressed in blue surgical scrubs. I'm here, my love. I'm here, he said, taking her hand and kissing her sweaty forehead. Everything's going to be okay. Our boy is going to be born strong and healthy. I was so scared. I thought I was going to lose him, she confessed, squeezing his hand. You're not going to lose him, and you're not going to lose me either. I love you, Livia. Nothing will ever change that. At 5:47 on that rainy Friday morning, Gabriel Machado was born weighing 2.5 kilos, measuring 45 centimeters, his tiny lungs working perfectly. He let out a strong cry that echoed through the operating room like celestial music. He's perfect, Dr. Andrade said, showing the baby to the emotional parents. Small, but perfect and healthy. Raul looked at his son in the doctor's arms and cried as he had never cried in his life. An intense mix of relief, joy, fear, and a love so overwhelming it was a physical ache in his chest. Hi, Gabriel. I'm your daddy, he whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. And this is your mommy, the bravest, most incredible woman in the world. We love you more than anything. Livia, still drowsy from the anesthesia, smiled at the pure emotion on the face of the man she loved. Gabriel spent 2 weeks in the neonatal ICU in a modern incubator surrounded by tubes and monitors that tracked every beat of his tiny heart. Raul and Livia took turns at the hospital, always by each other's side, talking to Gabriel through the glass, singing to him, reading children's stories. He knows your voices, remarked Carla, one of the specialized nurses. See how calm he gets when you speak to him? Livia, I need to tell you something important, Raul said one afternoon, as they watched Gabriel sleeping peacefully in his incubator. About that question you asked. If I would have fallen in love with you anyway, without needing a mother for Gabriel. She looked at him, bracing her heart for more disappointment. I hesitated that day because the question caught me by surprise, not because I had any doubts, he explained. The truth is, I was already in love with you before I even knew about the infertility, from the day we reconnected at the cafe. What do you mean? Remember those 2 weeks we spent having dinner together before I made the proposal? I was already hopelessly in love, but I was afraid of ruining our friendship, Raul confessed. The infertility story was almost an excuse my subconscious came up with to have you near me. If I had known I could have children normally, it probably would have taken me months to work up the courage to tell you how I felt. Are you serious? She asked, her heart starting to race. Completely serious. And I can prove it, he said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. I bought this 3 days after our first dinner, weeks before I ever heard the word infertility. I've always known I wanted to marry you. Inside the box was the most beautiful engagement ring she had ever seen, a 2-carat solitaire that glittered beneath the hospital lights. Livia Silva, will you marry me? Not because we have a son together, not because of a contract or an inheritance, but because I've loved you since I was 8 years old, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it to you. The proposal, made right there in the neonatal ICU, with Gabriel sleeping just a few feet away, was the most emotional moment of her life. Yes, she answered without a second's hesitation. Yes, I will marry you. Gabriel was discharged from the hospital, weighing a healthy 7 pounds, strong and thriving, just like any full-term baby. Their homecoming was magical. Raul had transformed the nursery into a work of art, with handcrafted white furniture, hand-painted wallpaper adorned with clouds and songbirds, and a musical mobile that played the lullaby they had sung to him throughout the pregnancy. "Welcome home, my prince," Livia whispered, placing Gabriel in his crib for the very first time. The wedding took place 3 months later, an intimate ceremony in the mansion's garden, decorated with thousands of white and yellow flowers. Livia wore a simple yet elegant gown, holding Gabriel in her arms throughout the ceremony. Today we are not just uniting two people in matrimony, but celebrating the birth of a family that has been blessed by true love, the priest said, as the three of them looked at each other with infinite emotion. Sebastião, who had miraculously recovered from cancer after an experimental treatment in the United States, held Gabriel during the reception, telling every guest, "This boy is the future of our company, but more importantly, he is proof that love always finds a way." During the newlyweds' dance in the illuminated garden, with Gabriel sleeping peacefully in his grandmother Carmen's arms, everyone knew they were witnessing a true love story. 2 years later, on a sunny Sunday morning, Livia woke up with a familiar wave of nausea. "Raul," she called, rushing to the bathroom. "What is it, my love?" he asked, appearing at the door with Gabriel crawling behind him. "I think I'm pregnant again," she said, showing him the positive test. But this time, it happened naturally. Raul swept her up into his arms and spun her around the house as Gabriel clapped his little hands, not quite understanding the celebration. "Two children," he said, kissing her passionately. "One son from destiny, and this one from nature." "Both from love," she corrected, touching the belly that would soon begin to grow again. "Our family is complete," and it was. Gabriel grew up surrounded by love, becoming an intelligent and affectionate boy who loved to play in the very same park where his parents had met. His little sister, Sophia, was born 9 months later, with her mother's brown eyes and her father's mischievous smile. At the company, Raul became one of the most respected businessmen in the country, but he always made sure to be home in time for family dinner. Livia returned to teaching. Now, at a private school she founded herself, specializing in humanized early childhood education. And every night, before going to sleep, they would peek into the children's room and silently give thanks for having found their way back to each other. "Do you regret any of it?" Raul asked one night, as they watched Gabriel and Sophia sleep. "Not a thing," Livia replied, nestling into his arms. "Not the contract, not the confusion, not the heartache, because it all led us here, to our perfect family, to our forever love." And they kissed right there in their children's room, knowing they had built something that would last for all eternity. In the end, what began as a desperate business arrangement had transformed into the greatest love story either of them could have ever imagined, proving that sometimes destiny takes the most winding paths to bring two soulmates together, and that true love always finds a way to conquer every obstacle. If you enjoyed Livia and Raul's story, please give it a warm like. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our stories, and tell me in the comments below, do you believe in love at first sight, or that two people can be destined for each other since childhood? Share this story with someone special, because love that is shared multiplies. And always remember, never give up on true love, because when it's real, it always finds a way. Thank you so much for joining me. Until the next story.